Lyra 9 floated above the gas giant Lorenth like a silver halo, a monument to the Galactic Empire's pride. They called it the crown jewel of civil harmony, a neutral trade and diplomatic station where species gathered to show off their best culture, intellect, and of course how far removed they were from their primal pasts, which made the arrival of the humans a bit of a sore spot. In Docking Bay 42, a cluster of humans shuffled off their aging transport, looking more like a Midwest family reunion than representatives of Earth's best. Among them was a single mother, Deborah Walker, and her daughter Lila, 6 years old, wild curls, and a look in her eye that said she'd already broken 3 rules today and was working on the 4th. Deb carried herself with the weary grace of someone who'd survived both battlefield deployments and PTA meetings. Station Commander Verrill, a tentacled bureaucrat whose patience had calcified centuries ago, observed the humans with disdainful interest. He found Earthlings loud, disorganized, unpleasantly optimistic. They always walked in like they owned the place, even when their clothes screamed military surplus and garage sale. But what irked Verrill most was their refusal to behave predictably, especially the small ones. Lila clutched a battered plastic device in her tiny hands, its screen flickering faintly. An old Tamagotchi. The alien observers logged it as primitive. Digital symbiosis ritual object. She poked the buttons with the intensity of a nuclear technician under duress, brow furrowed. "Don't push it too hard," Deb said, eyes scanning the station's security layout with the passive disinterest of someone who could find every blind spot in under 60 seconds. "It's dying again," Lila muttered, tapping rapidly. "He needs snacks, or he poops himself to death." A passing guard, a sleek, gelatinous species known for their auditory sensitivity, winced. Verrill's second-in-command Zakrell scowled. "They brought the sound units again." "Children," Verrill corrected with loathing. "Why? Can't they be muted?" "They scream, sir, loudly, for no reason. Contain it." Before Zakrell could issue containment orders, the Tamagotchi's final digital squeal emitted a warbled bleep blorp, and then went still. A little tombstone appeared on its tiny pixelated screen. Lila stared in horror. Her bottom lip trembled. Deb reached out instinctively, but the scream ripped through the chamber like a siren from hell. It wasn't the volume. It was the frequency. Some unholy cocktail of grief, frustration, and raw 6-year-old defiance. Every alien in a 40-meter radius clutched something vital. One guard's translator implant exploded in a puff of smoke. 2 drones spiraled into a wall. A Draxel technician fainted on the spot, a bubble of pink ooze gurgling from its auditory cortex. Lila kept going, the wail crescendoing. Her lungs defied known biology. A neighboring kiosk's glass shattered. A sanitation bot panicked and deployed. Foam. Lights flickered. The Empire's surveillance AI flagged the event as an unsanctioned sonic discharge. Deb didn't react. She didn't flinch or scold. She just stood there, arms crossed, a knowing look on her face. This wasn't her first meltdown. Verrill staggered back. "Was that an attack?" Zakrell scrambled for his data pad. "Unclear. No known weapon matches the frequency. Could be a signal jammer, or an emotional amplifier." "She's crying because her fake pet died," Deb called out without raising her voice. "It's a phase. She'll be done soon." But the AI disagreed. Already its systems had tagged the child as a potential Category Red disturbance. Alerts cascaded through the command chain. Source: human juvenile. Incident type: anomalous. Acoustic event. Immediate threat. Pending escalation. Verrill's upper eyelid twitched. "Secure the child." "You secure her," Zakrell muttered, backing away. 2 security drones approached. Lila's wail became a shriek. One drone twitched, sensors spasming. Its arm fired a net by accident. The net hit a merchant stand, collapsing a display of Xanthian spices. Red mist exploded everywhere. A spice dealer screamed in 12 languages. Deb raised a single eyebrow. Zakrel hit his comm. Containment Unit 4, deploy. Target, human. Class minor, code name. Scream spawn. The Empire's pride didn't allow them to believe in fear. But many on Elira 9 would later describe the next 5 minutes as the longest of their lives. The child's scream rolled through ducts and walls, setting off fire suppression systems, scrambling navigational signals, and disrupting gravitational dampeners in the East Wing. Several species mistook it for a galactic death whale mating. Call. One fled the station entirely. Meanwhile, Deb calmly unwrapped a piece of cinnamon gum and popped it in her mouth. Verrill turned on her. "What is this? Scream storm?" "She's just upset," Deb replied evenly. "You ever had a pet die when you're 6? Zakrel stammered, rubbing his vibrating cranium. "How is she still going? What's powering it?" "Pure indignation," Deb said. "And fruit. Loops?" Verrill gnashed his mandibles. "Remove the object. Quarantine the juvenile. Perform psychological dissection." Deb's gum froze mid-chew. "Come again? Your spawn is a security threat. It must be neutralized, or studied." Deb's stance shifted. Barely. Shoulders straightened, head tilted just a little. She smiled. It wasn't warm. "You so much as touch my kid, and I'll introduce you to a kind of pain your ancestors never evolved ears for. Are you threatening a sovereign commander?" "No. I'm informing you of the consequences of stupid decisions." At that moment, Lila finally hiccuped to silence. A few hiccups followed. She wiped her nose on her sleeve, sniffled, and stared, around at the devastation. "I think I broke their stuff," she mumbled. Zakrel looked at the ruined wall panels and downed guards. "You think?" The Empire wasn't ready for emotional warfare. Their protocol manuals were full of contingency plans, plasma leaks, mass insurrections, black hole anomalies, but they had no section for "child cries too hard, takes down half the station." Reports came in: food processor AI crash, grav lift, malfunctions, a diplomatic envoy stuck in a sanitation closet due to screech-induced door reversal. The system flagged the human child as a possible Type 3 existential anomaly. Reassessment requested. Threat level recalibrated. Zakrel leaned in toward Verrill. "Sir, I recommend we avoid any action that would provoke further maternal response. There's something unquantifiable about this one. Are you saying we retreat?" "I'm saying we proceed with maximum diplomatic appeasement." Verrill stared at the human girl, now calmly drawing shapes in a pile of spilled alien flour. Her mother stood beside her, chewing gum and watching the command team like a woman who'd once wrestled death and won by headbutt. "Have we ever encountered this behavior before?" Verrill asked faintly. Zakrel scrolled through the archive. "One instance, Earth, early 21st century. Incident known as Walmart Tantrum Apocalypse of 1997. No survivors. Documentation corrupted by VHS decay." "I want her and her mother monitored," Verrill hissed. "Constantly. But from a distance." The Empire filed its first diplomatic memo with Earth under the new category: human minor, female, unstable energy source, potential tactical asset, do not engage. Meanwhile, Lila looked up at her mother and smiled. "Can I have a snack?" Debbie nodded. "Sure. But not from these guys. They don't have goldfish." Zakrel muttered under his breath, noting the term goldfish in his pad, unsure whether it was a nutrient, a creature, or a chemical weapon. As the pair walked down the corridor, station techs scrambled to reroute power and recompile shredded data. No one spoke. The air was thick with a shared understanding that something terrifying had just happened. Not because of bloodshed, not because of lasers, but because a child had screamed, and the most powerful civilization in the galaxy had no defense. Far above in the orbiting ship Obedience Prime, an admiral received the emergency flag. He opened the report. Audio logs warped. System warnings flashed. The child's name was listed in red. But what caught his eye was a single sentence added at the bottom of the summary. Immediate action inadvisable. Human maternal unit present. The admiral read it twice. Then he locked the file, stood up, and quietly requested shore leave. The humans continued down the corridor, oblivious to the chaos behind them. Lila hummed. Deb unwrapped another piece of gum. Somewhere deep in the Empire's data core, new protocols were being written. Warnings updated, contingencies revised. Because the Empire had just learned something ancient and terrible. You don't mess with Earth kids, and you never mess with their mothers. 3 days after the incident on Elira 9, the child was still a problem. Not because she'd screamed again. She hadn't. Lila Walker had been relatively quiet, preoccupied with coloring holographic projections of extinct Earth animals, and trying to train the station's cleaning drones to follow her around like pets. The problem wasn't noise anymore. The problem was the data. The Empire's central intelligence node, Vexorium, processed trillions of communications each second. Its predictive algorithms had mapped thousands of species over centuries. It categorized, indexed, forecasted. But it couldn't predict Lila Walker. Every behavioral simulation failed. Her responses to controlled stimuli were erratic. Threat assessment models collapsed. Worst of all, her influence on surrounding systems, mechanical and biological, defied causal mapping. Statistical anomalies had begun to cluster around her presence. An interdepartmental task force was formed. They called it Human Juvenile Contingency, CEL, HJCC. And it wasn't just about Lila anymore. Because everywhere Lila went, her mother went too. Deborah Walker, age 37, former combat medic turned logistics contractor, had no formal authority aboard the station. She wasn't part of any diplomatic delegation. Her security clearance was 0, and yet over the last 72 hours, half of Elira 9's internal command structures had quietly rerouted operations to avoid intersecting her path. No order had been given. The pattern had simply emerged. Commander Verrill stood in silence as HJCC presented its findings. 16 minor disruptions, none intentional, 3 indirect system failures, 2 energy grid fluctuations. Total cost in repairs, 72,000 galactic credits, said Zakrel, tapping through the report. All traceable to the child's presence. But the mother, he hesitated. Yes? Verrill prompted, voice tight. She's not doing anything. She's simply watching. It's the stillness. Like she's waiting. For what? That's what terrifies me, Zakrel whispered. The Empire had protocols for potential precursors to interstellar threats. Unchecked variables. Deviations. But it had never classified a civilian human woman and her 6-year-old as anything beyond irrelevant. That was changing. 2 decks below, Deborah sat in a dim corridor beside a vending machine that served semi-sentient pastries. Lila had found one that squeaked when bitten and declared it her new best friend. She named it Gibbles. The pastry had attempted escape once, but after Lila hugged it tightly for 7 minutes, it ceased movement entirely. Some said it gave up. Others argued it achieved enlightenment. Either way, it didn't squeak anymore. Deborah watched station personnel pass with increasing unease. Not theirs, hers. She saw how the guards tensed when walking by, how maintenance drones hesitated. At corners, the entire station was adjusting its rhythm to avoid confrontation with someone who had never raised her voice, never shown a weapon, never issued a threat. She understood what that meant. Fear without contact, mistrust without action. It wasn't a reaction to what she'd done. It was preparation for what they believed she could do. And she knew where that kind of fear led. A shadow approached, tall, inhumanly graceful, clad in imperial white, with markings of diplomatic clearance, 4 fingers on each hand, eyes lidless and black. His voice carried the oily calm of someone who considered himself above harm. "I am Senator Carthix of the Telrin High Council," he said. "Might I speak with you, Miss Walker?" "You already are," Deborah replied. Carthix smiled. "I come as a mediator. There are concerns. Your child has become a destabilizing presence. Not intentionally, of course, but actions have consequences. She's 6. That's exactly the issue. A being so young, so volatile, should not have this effect. It alarms the Empire. They fear a phenomenon, a contagion." Deborah shifted her posture just slightly. "She's not a contagion. She's a kid. And yet," Carthix continued, "you cannot deny that her presence distorts this place. We seek harmony, stability, predictable variables. Kids aren't variables. They're people. You want predictable? Go talk to your robots." Carthix folded his hands. "We request she be temporarily moved to an isolation chamber. Observational only. Painless. We can ensure enrichment, comfort, full digital access." Deborah's jaw tensed. "You want to separate us?" "Only for a time, to ensure that she's not a precursor to a greater threat. She's a child with a broken toy and an imagination. If that scares your empire, then maybe it's not as strong as you think." His eyes narrowed. "You misunderstand. This is not a threat. It's a courtesy. We offer containment as an alternative to preemptive neutralization." The silence that followed was total. Even the vending machine stopped humming. Deborah stood, and every nearby sensor recorded a dip in localized temperature. "I've stitched soldiers together with my bare hands, pulled lungs back into chest cavities. I've watched friends choke on their own blood while bureaucrats argued about war ethics on conference calls," she said, voice even. "You think a sterile isolation cell is something new? You think you're showing me something I haven't seen before? No. What you're doing is reminding me why I stopped trusting empires." Karthik straightened. "That was not a threat. That was policy." "Then your policy needs to learn fear." The senator hesitated. For the first time he felt it. Not a threat. A presence. Not the weight of weaponry or power, but something harder to categorize. Absolute certainty. This was a woman who had walked out of the worst parts of war, still breathing, still dangerous, and she had one sacred boundary. Her child. "You misunderstand us," Karthix tried again. "We only seek understanding." "Then start by listening." He left without another word. Later that evening, the first classified directive was issued by Elira 9's Control AI to every Imperial outpost in 3 sectors. Do not engage Human Subject Walker, D, or Human Minor Walker, L, without multi-level authorization. In the event of separation attempt, trigger code black and evacuate diplomatic personnel. The implications were clear. The Empire didn't fear the child. It feared the mother. In the hours that followed, 2 species filed formal requests to negotiate directly with the walkers. The Creel offered sweets. The Jatari sent a puzzle box containing a solar system in miniature. Both were declined. Lila said she didn't trust anyone who couldn't do cartwheels. Deb said she didn't trust anyone who wanted something in return. Meanwhile, intelligence units analyzed every aspect of Deborah Walker's past. Her record was clean, but clean in the wrong way. Too precise. No contradictions. No gaps. Every evaluation score optimal, but not exceptional. Every deployment survived but never meddled. She had done her job and faded into the system like vapor. But she'd been there, in every major conflict, at every humanitarian disaster. Not a hero, a witness. And in the data's absence of glory, something else emerged. She was a survivor. More than that, she made others survive. The profile scared them more than any decorated warlord ever had. Back on Earth, stories about Elira 9 began circulating in fringe forums and encrypted chat clusters. The mom who shut down an Empire wing. Scream baby makes aliens cry. And eventually, do not mess with human mothers. Governments denied involvement. Military analysts dismissed the reports as exaggeration. But soldiers, especially those who had served near Deborah Walker, read and said nothing. They remembered her. The steady hands, the calm voice, the way she'd never run from an explosion, only toward whoever was left behind. Now she was in space, alone with her child, and surrounded by enemies too bureaucratic to realize they were already losing. The next day, Verrill issued a containment proposal to High Command. Move the humans off station under the guise of hospitality. Provide safe transport. Redirect them to Earth or any neutral moon base. Let them go. The proposal was denied. Instead, new instructions arrived. Contain, divide, observe, dissect. The directive was signed by a name none of them recognized. And far away, aboard an Imperial facility hidden behind radiation curtains and comms jammers, a different kind of team was being assembled, not diplomats, not researchers, enforcers. Because the Empire had decided something dangerous. If the child could scream down systems, what else might she do? If the mother could shake an entire station with nothing but silence, what else might she be? They would not ask again. They would act. But what they hadn't understood, what they never learned in their endless calculations, was the thing that made humanity dangerous. Wasn't its weapons, or its technology, or even its unpredictable children. It was what happened when someone tried to take those children away. And Deborah Walker had already decided. If they came for her daughter, she wasn't going to survive it. But they wouldn't either. The first of them arrived cloaked in civilian attire. No insignia, no formal entry. The Empire called them observers. But Deborah recognized them for what they were. Not by the way they stood or walked, but by the silence that followed them. They didn't make noise, not by mistake. Trained stillness, too perfect to be real. She saw one blink in sync with the hallway's automated lights, and knew these weren't diplomats. These were the kind of men you sent when decisions had already been made. She didn't acknowledge them, not directly, but she began counting. The cameras, 13 in their living quadrant, 7 placed in the common halls within the last day, 2 floating surveillance orbs disguised as cleaning drones. Lila thought they were new toys. Deborah taught her a game, Spot the Spies. Lila laughed. The station's analytics team logged her emotional response. They didn't realize the child was mapping them back. At night, Deborah ran mental drills, not combat, extraction. She calculated oxygen levels in the emergency shuttles, access time from their wing to the secondary launch deck, guard patrol rotations. She'd memorized 3 alternate routes through the maintenance shafts and tested 2 with Lila under the pretense of a treasure hunt. The girl didn't suspect. She just loved crawling through tight spaces with her mom and pretending to be a dragon. Meanwhile, the Empire tested boundaries. Little things. A nutrient formula swapped. A room temperature adjustment. One morning, the vending machine Gibbles came from was removed without explanation. When Lila asked why her friend was gone, Deborah didn't answer. She just made a quiet note. Provocation through emotional disruption. They were escalating. Then the first blackout came. 15 seconds of complete power loss. System logs said it was a calibration surge. But 15 seconds was long enough for every corridor light to go dark, for every door to lock, and for Lila's room to seal without warning. Deborah was brushing her daughter's hair when the lights vanished. She moved on instinct, pulled the child close, shielded her with her body, counted down from 5 before the emergency lights kicked in. When the power returned, a message awaited. Her, unaddressed, no origin signature. You've been evaluated. Containment is preferable. Do not resist. Deborah didn't sleep that night. Neither did Lila. Not because she was afraid, because she sensed something was wrong. She asked if Mom was mad. Deborah told her no, but her eyes never left the corridor outside. She waited to see which ghost would come through the door first. None did. The next day, a delegation arrived, but not for Deborah, for Lila. 6 individuals, 4 non-human, 2 human, all diplomatic clearance. They brought gifts, books that shimmered, toys that adapted to neural feedback, a cake that played music when sliced. They smiled and spoke gently, pretending this was a cultural exchange. Deborah stood in the corner, watching them offer bribes to her daughter. One alien with glassy skin extended a crystalline orb and said, "This lets you see other worlds. Would you like to go visit them with us?" Lila glanced at her mother. Deborah said nothing, but the girl understood. She shook her head and said, "I already have a world." The visitors left with tight smiles. One of the humans glanced at Deborah on the way out and muttered, "Wasting potential." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her silence said more than words could. That evening, station control rerouted water access in their section. For 4 hours, the plumbing failed. When it returned, the temperature was scalding. An accident, they said. Routine maintenance. Deborah treated her daughter's minor burn and made a 3rd entry in her notebook. Phase 2. Environmental pressure. The Empire thought slowly, strategically. It didn't send soldiers with guns. It sent stress, fatigue, confusion, the kind that chipped at a parent's patience and a child's sense of safety. They weren't trying to take Lila by force. They were trying to make Deborah give her up willingly. They didn't understand who they were dealing with. Deborah Walker had been in medical tents surrounded by screaming soldiers with limbs blown off, had delivered babies beside corpses, had stitched up enemies when orders said not to. She'd survived war not by killing, but by refusing to let people die when no one else cared enough to try. And now the Empire thought it could wear her down with bad plumbing and polite threats. She smiled for the first time in days. Not because she was amused, but because they were still underestimating her. The next morning, she made a decision. She sent a request to the only entity on the station with autonomous authority beyond command. Chains. The AI. It didn't have a name, just a designation. Elira Core. She accessed it through a maintenance terminal while Lila was coloring on the floor beside her. "Query," Deborah typed. "Am I being monitored without consent?" The screen paused, flickered, then returned with, "Confirmed. Multiple unauthorized inputs active in your designated sectors." "Query," she typed again. "Has Lila Walker been classified as a variable threat?" Another pause. Then, "Classification pending. Subroutine Vexorium pending override." She understood immediately. The decision hadn't been made yet, which meant it still could be influenced. So she sent one more line. "Begin protocol. Witness statement." The system didn't respond for a full minute. Then, "Recording." Deborah looked at the camera. "My name is Deborah Walker. I am the legal guardian and mother of Lila Walker. I issue this statement not in defense, but as testimony." She spoke. For 10 minutes. She talked about the years in war zones, the abandoned hospitals, the soldiers who died with letters in their hands. She told the story of the time she saved an enemy child by performing emergency surgery while gunfire echoed overhead. She didn't embellish. She didn't cry. And then she said, "I've seen what happens when institutions treat people like anomalies. I've seen what happens when children are turned into case studies. You don't need to study her. You need to let her live." When she finished, the screen went blank. She waited. Hours passed. Then someone tried to take Lila. Not violently. Not publicly. A casual escort masked as a station tour. They approached while Lila was playing in the arboretum, said they wanted to show her something beautiful, that her mom would meet them later. It was rehearsed, gentle, almost kind, until Deborah stepped between them. She didn't yell. She didn't touch them. She just asked one question. "Do you have authorization?" They froze. She repeated it. "Do you have written, signed, witnessed authorization from Station Command, Earth Council, or any registered interspecies judiciary?" They didn't answer. She leaned closer, voice a whisper. "Because if you try to move my daughter without it, I will make this station forget you ever existed." The child handlers retreated. 2 resigned within 24 hours. That night, Deborah found a small envelope outside their quarters. Inside was a note written in clean imperial script. "We understand now. We will not try again. You have our respect." She didn't believe it for a second. Respect in the Empire was just delay, a stall tactic while they figured out a different approach. But the message meant one thing clearly. They'd failed to break her. That was victory enough. But it wasn't the end, because somewhere deeper in the system, past the observers and handlers, past the strategists and analysts, someone else had taken interest. Someone who didn't care about observation or strategy. Someone who had been waiting for the Empire to fail. A man with no official rank, no digital footprint, and a reputation whispered across battlefields. A man who had once vanished an entire rebel moon base without using a single weapon. He didn't serve governments. He didn't follow laws. He was called when everything else failed. And now, he was coming for the girl. Not because he feared her, but because he was told she was impossible, and that was something he couldn't ignore. Deborah didn't know his name. Not yet, but when he came, he wouldn't knock. He didn't arrive through a hangar or a gate. No delegation greeted him. No manifest marked his entry. One moment, the station's traffic logs were silent. The next, a maintenance corridor on Deck 12 registered a temperature shift. Subtle, 2 degrees higher than normal, and the biometric sensors detected a presence they couldn't categorize. The system flagged the anomaly and auto-routed it to security. Security ignored it. That was the first mistake. He walked the station like it was already his. Not with arrogance, but with the quiet assurance of a man who had survived things others didn't live to describe. He wore no uniform, no armor, no traceable gear. Just a charcoal gray jacket, dusty boots, and a wristband older than the Empire's charter. His name was never spoken aloud, but in certain quarters, even silence bore his weight. Rumors called him Cade. To Deborah Walker, he was an abstraction. Until he wasn't. She was reviewing emergency evac timings for the 4th time when the terminal blinked. Not an alert. Not a message. A direct override. The screen wiped clean, reloaded in an interface she hadn't seen since her deployment years. Then a voice. Deep, even. Unhurried. "I'm not here to hurt your daughter." Her hand moved toward the desk drawer, fingers brushing metal. The voice continued. "If I were, you'd already know." She said nothing. "You're thinking of countermeasures." "Good. That means you're ready to listen." Deborah kept her voice low, steady. "You have one chance to explain why you're in my system." A pause. Then, "Because I'm the last one they call before they burn it all down. And someone in their chain just did." She didn't blink. "You're Black Echo." A silence followed, but not of denial. "They never call me by name," he said finally. "They call me when containment fails." She stood. "Lila's not a threat." "I agree. But the problem isn't what she is. It's what they think she might become. Then they're wrong." "They usually are. But that never stops them." Deborah's jaw tensed. "You're here to take her." "No," he said. "I'm here to protect her." She didn't trust that. "Not yet." He appeared 12 minutes later, not through the door, but already seated across the table when she turned back around. No weapon visible, no sound to his movement, just calm presence, a living contradiction. "She's still just a kid," Deborah said. He nodded. "A kid who taught herself to override biometric locks with a coloring pad. A kid who speaks 30 words in a language no one on this station taught her. She's adapting. That's what children do." "Not like this. She's accelerating." Deborah stepped between him and the room where Lila slept. "That's not a crime." He studied her, not with suspicion but with something close to respect. "I didn't come to take her," he said again. "But they will. Unless you do something you're not going to like." She didn't move. "What?" "You have to disappear." He waited for the reaction. Expected anger, denial. What he saw instead was calculation. "For how long?" "Indefinitely. I can get you to the outer systems. No trails, no signals. You'll be off their grid. They'll come looking." "Not if they think you're already gone." Her eyes narrowed. "You want to fake our deaths?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Deborah exhaled. Not fear. Resolve. She deserves better than a lifetime of running. "She deserves to grow up," he said. "That's not guaranteed anymore." They worked in silence for 2 hours. Cade accessed internal systems she'd never seen. He rewrote surveillance feeds, looped thermal logs, rerouted all outgoing transmissions through 5 different derelict satellites. He constructed a fire, protocol complete with simulated remains. Dental records, blood traces, everything the Empire would need to declare the walkers dead. Deborah packed in minutes, not because she lacked attachment, but because she'd spent weeks preparing for this moment. Lila didn't cry when they left. She just held her mother's hand and asked if they were going on another adventure. Deborah smiled. "The biggest one yet." They didn't use a shuttle. Cade had something older, pre-Empire tech, analog controls, shielded from scans. They entered orbit without pinging a single sensor. From the station's perspective, their quarters caught fire, burned uncontrollably, and 2 unidentifiable bodies were recovered from the wreckage. Within 48 hours, the Empire closed its investigation. The case was sealed. The walkers were declared casualties of a tragic systems failure, but not everyone believed it. A month passed before the first anomaly appeared in the outer systems. A supply freighter found hacked medical logs showing an unknown woman administering treatment in a settlement with no assigned doctor. The next week, a group of orphaned refugees on a border moon claimed they'd been saved by a lady with silver eyes and a little girl who spoke with stars in her voice. Cade warned Deborah not to stay in one place too long. She didn't listen. She set up makeshift clinics wherever she could, kept her head down, but helped who she found. Bandaged wounds, delivered children, healed broken things. Lila watched it all, learned, grew. It wasn't long before the rumors began. A medic ghost, a girl who could read minds, a mother who vanished in flame and walked the stars. The Empire ignored them, at first, until one day a message was intercepted, from a distant colony where a viral outbreak had been halted overnight. The message read, "To whoever's listening, Deborah Walker is alive, and she's not hiding anymore." They dispatched retrieval units within hours. By the time the ships arrived, the town was empty, except for a wall, painted on it, in black ink. "You tried to kill what you didn't understand. Now you'll never catch her." It was signed. Kay, the man who'd once been a myth, was no longer running from shadows. He was teaching them to fear one. Back at the Empire's Central Intelligence Vault, a file once sealed was reopened. Containment protocols rewritten. New threat classifications assigned. Subject: Lila Walker. Status: unknown. Priority: Alpha-tier anomaly. Directive: observe. Do not engage without explicit command authority. Beneath the order, someone had scrawled in pen, "They're not anomalies, they're the future, and you missed your chance." Far from that cold administrative world, aboard a ship hidden beyond the fringe, Lila watched stars blur past. Her mother sat beside her, tending to a bruised farmer with a busted rib. Cade stood at the helm, quiet, alert, always ready. The girl turned to him. "Will they keep chasing us?" He didn't lie. "Yes." She thought about it. "Will they catch us?" He looked at her, really looked, and said, "Not unless you let them." She grinned. "Then they won't." Deborah smiled. Not because they were safe, but because her daughter wasn't afraid. And as long as that held true, nothing the Empire sent would ever be enough. Not for them. Not anymore.